Starting an LLC may seem a bit complicated, tedious, complex, but starting an LLC can also provide the opportunity to change one's life. In today's video, I'm going to simplify the entire process for you, and I'm going to explain how to start an LLC in just 7 steps. This will apply to both US citizens as well as non-US citizens. Hi, my name is Andrew, and I'm the managing attorney here at Freedom Through Business, where we help entrepreneurs just like you start their businesses without having to deal with all the confusing and tedious legal paperwork. If you're looking to start your own business and you've been considering registering an LLC, do not fear, for Freedom Through Business is here. The purpose of these videos are to provide you with as much guidance and clarity in the beginning stages of starting a business. So if you haven't already, please make sure you hit the like, subscribe, as well as the bell notification so you don't miss out on any future videos. Keep in mind, as a side note, that it is very important to speak with a professional prior to doing anything. The purpose of these videos are for educational purposes only. And so with that side note out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about the 7 steps to start an LLC as a US citizen or as a non-US citizen. The first step that an entrepreneur must consider prior to doing anything is going to be, which state should I register my LLC in? Now, it really depends on a couple of factors. One of the main factors is whether or not you're a US citizen and whether or not you're a non-US citizen. Now, if you are a US citizen and you're watching this video, the best state to form an LLC is going to be the state that you live in. Now, there's a lot of information out there on the web that says that an entrepreneur that's a US citizen should form some sort of LLC in a state like Delaware, etc. The number one reason why it's recommended that an entrepreneur that's a US citizen register the LLC in the state that they live in is because, say for example, an entrepreneur lives in California and they do end up registering an LLC in the state of Delaware. In that case, once their Delaware LLC is registered, they're then going to need to notify the state of California that they have an outside business out of state. And so in this case, now that entrepreneur will be liable for any sort of state expenses, taxes associated with the state of Delaware, as well as any sort of state expenses and taxes associated with California. In other words, when a California-based entrepreneur registers an LLC out of state, that entrepreneur will be responsible for both state taxes and expenses. Now, moving on, if you're a non-US citizen and you're looking to register an LLC, you have flexibility. Now, when it comes to the most favorable state to register an LLC as a non-US citizen, there are 2 main states that automatically come to mind to many entrepreneurs. That's going to be the state of Delaware as well as the state of Wyoming. Now, there are various differences between these 2 states, so allow me to provide a little bit more clarity there. The reason why entrepreneurs that are non-US citizens choose to form an LLC in the state of Delaware is if they have outside investors. In other words, they're raising private equity. They've been speaking with third-party investors who are considering investing in that entrepreneur's business. In that case, Delaware may be a better option. But let's say, for example, an individual, an entrepreneur, is starting a completely new business. They don't plan to raise any sort of outside equity, or they don't plan to have any outside investors, at least for the foreseeable future. In that case, which state is better, Delaware or Wyoming? In this case, for that specific entrepreneur who is starting off their entire business from scratch, they're not working with any outside investors, Wyoming is going to be one of the more favorable states for that entrepreneur. Now, there are a variety of reasons for this. Wyoming has some of the most favorable business laws for non-US citizens. One, there is anonymity, which means that when you register an LLC in the state of Wyoming, the owners of that LLC are anonymous. Their private information, their personal information is kept private. Secondly, Wyoming has some of the fastest, most straightforward processes available in comparison to other states. This means that they are very efficient. And what I mean by this is Wyoming is extremely quick in processing documents. So if an entrepreneur were to file an LLC in the state of Wyoming, they would receive their company documents within a day. What I mean by this is if an entrepreneur were to file their documents with the Wyoming Secretary of State, they would receive their company documents within a day. That is how efficient Wyoming is. And the third major benefit of forming a Wyoming LLC is going to be the personal liability protection that Wyoming offers. Wyoming has some of the strongest protection laws, rules in place, which means that it is nearly impossible to pierce the corporate protection that LLCs provide. In other words, it's nearly impossible, very difficult, to pierce the personal liability that LLCs registered in Wyoming provide. So to sum up this first point, if an entrepreneur is a US citizen and they live in California, then it will be best to form an LLC in the state of California. If an entrepreneur is a non-US citizen and they have outside investors, then they're going to want to consider Delaware. But assuming that they are a non-US citizen, they're an entrepreneur, and they're not working with any outside investors, or they do not plan to raise any sort of private equity, in that case, Wyoming will be the best state. Choosing a state to register an LLC is just the first step. Now that the state is in mind, they're going to need to have the correct business details. And so what do I mean by this? What do I mean by correct business details? 1, they're going to need a company name. 2, they're going to need a business address. And 3, they're going to need a registered agent and a registered agent address. And keep in mind this applies to both US citizens as well as non-US citizens. Choosing a business name is quite straightforward. You're going to want to choose a business name that reflects either the services that one plans to provide or the products that one plans to provide. Keep in mind that in choosing a business name, the business name must be unique, which means that it cannot be similar to that of an existing business company name. Additionally, an individual cannot use a already registered company name. The best way to determine whether or not a company name is available is to visit the Secretary of State website where you plan to register the LLC. So if you plan to register an LLC in California, you're going to want to check the California Secretary of State business name search. If you plan to form a company in the state of Wyoming, then in that case you're going to want to visit the Wyoming Secretary of State website in order to determine the business name availability search. Now, after a company name is decided upon, the next step is going to be choosing a business address. Now, choosing a business address is extremely important, especially if you see yourself running and maintaining this business in the long term, especially as a US citizen and a non-US citizen. Now, keep in mind that typically PO boxes are not acceptable when it comes to a business address. However, foreign addresses for non-US citizens and home addresses for US citizens are acceptable. Keep in mind that a foreign address, a foreign business address, can be a non-US citizen's home address as well. While these options sound quite appealing, you're going to want to really consider what business address you plan to use. And the reason why I stress this is because when it comes to a business address is associated with one's business. And so, for example, if an entrepreneur has a website, it's likely that that entrepreneur has their address, their business address, posted on that website. If that entrepreneur is a non-US citizen and they're using their foreign address, if they use that and they post that foreign address onto their website, any sort of clients, potential customers that visit the website may see that business address. Posting one's business address is supposed to create trust and it's supposed to create credibility. And so if a client or a customer visits an entrepreneur's website and they see a foreign address, then that may deter the client or the customer from moving forward with that business because it's providing them with red flags. In order to remedy the situation, a non-US citizen can register what's called a virtual business address. There are a variety of virtual business address providers out there that assist with registering US virtual business addresses. And so for one's website, instead of using a foreign business address, they would be able to use a US virtual business address which will be registered in the state where the LLC is formed. Hence, building and creating credibility as well as trust. Now, in choosing a business address as a US citizen, as I mentioned previously, an individual is able to use their home address for their business address. However, there are some issues with this option. If an individual, a US entrepreneur, wants to keep their home address private, then it is not recommended that they use their home address for their business address. And the reason for this is once a business is registered with the Secretary of State, say for example the California Secretary of State, if that US entrepreneur used their home address for their business address, their home address is going to show on the Secretary of State registrar. It will be made public. And so in order to remedy this, very similar to what I talked about earlier, a US-based entrepreneur can look into registering a virtual business address. Once the business address has been finalized, this leads me to the third requirement, which is going to be the registered agent. Now, this applies to both US citizens and non-US citizens. The purpose of a registered agent is to receive any sort of legal lawsuits, any sort of legal letters from the state on behalf of the LLC itself. This means that the registered agent, as well as the registered agent address, must be registered in the state where the company is formed. If the company is formed in California, the registered agent, as well as the registered agent address, must be in California. If the LLC is registered in Wyoming, then the registered agent and the registered agent address must be in the state of Wyoming. Depending on one's preferences, very similar to the business address, a registered agent can be oneself. It can be an entrepreneur themselves. They can include their home address as the place to be served. However, if a US-based entrepreneur decides to use themselves as well as their home address as the registered agent and the registered agent address, all of that information will be made public. And so in order to remedy this, there are registered agent providers out there that charge either monthly or yearly. Hence, the US-based entrepreneur can keep their personal name and their personal home address private. For a non-US citizen, it is very important to note that the registered agent and registered agent address cannot be overseas. It must be located in the state where the LLC is formed. And so if the LLC is formed in Wyoming, then in that case, the registered agent, as well as the registered agent address, must also be located in the state of Wyoming. This brings me to the fourth requirement, which is going to be the EIN number. If you're not too familiar with what the EIN number is, it stands for Employer Identification Number. I like to view it as a social security number for a business. The EIN number is also considered and called the Business Tax ID number, and it's required in order to file taxes on behalf of the business. If you are a US citizen, you will be able to use your social security number in order to apply for the EIN number online, and you can get it anywhere from 1 to 3 days. It's quite instant. If you are a non-US citizen, then in that case you're going to have to take a little different route, and that route is you will not be able to apply for the EIN number online. You will have to fill out Form SS4. And once you complete Form SS4, you'll then need to mail it to the correct IRS mailing address. And keep in mind that there are numerous IRS offices, so it's very important that you mail it to the correct one. The fifth step one is going to need to take is they're going to want to draft all the necessary internal legal documents. This includes the operating agreement. If you're not too familiar with what an operating agreement is, an operating agreement is an internal legal document that reflects the ownership in the company. So if there are one owner, so if there's one owner, or if there are two owners, or if there are multiple owners, this is a document that will prove ownership. Additionally, The operating agreement will outline the list and responsibilities that the owners of the LLC have. An operating agreement is quite an important document. If a LLC gets audited for whatever reason, one of the first internal legal documents that the auditor is going to consider is going to be the operating agreement. So make sure that the operating agreement is in existence. In fact, it's a document that provides effectiveness to the LLC. Sixth step is, once you've gone through all these steps, an individual and entrepreneur is then going to want to open a U.S. business bank account. An entrepreneur can either open one in person at a physical branch such as Chase or Bank of America, but if an entrepreneur is a non-U.S. citizen and they do not want to travel to the U.S., then they're going to want to consider opening an online business bank account for their U.S. company. And then the seventh and final step is going to be seeking out tax advice. It's very important to keep track of taxes to submit what is required and necessary in order to stay compliant. And so always speak with an accountant, a CPA, someone who is knowledgeable in tax, who is properly certified and licensed. If you happen to enjoy this video, please make sure you hit the like, subscribe, as well as the bell notification so you don't miss out on any future videos. It's time to invest in yourself. It's time to rise.